Right. And Caitlin Zupanik did the cover for last year's anthology, which was A Dragon and Her Girl, which was a really awesome one. I don't have one sitting here, else I'd show it to you. But my name is Joe Monson. I'll be moderating this sort of panel. It's not exactly a panel because we aren't discussing anything per se, but I'll let each of the people who are here uh, briefly introduce themselves. And we'll start with Bobbie, then go to Dave, then Joe, and then Scott.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bobbie Berendson W, and my sister and I worked on the cover. I did a lot of the design work, and we came up with a thing together, a picture together, and then she did all the color work. And we're pretty proud of it. We've both been artists for years and years and years, and involved in the symposium for at least as long. So we were very excited to do that. That's me.
Now it's Dave.
Hi, I'm Dave. My 10th traditionally published novel came out last week. It's The Jupiter Knife. You'll see it on one of the little filters I use. Oh, on the filter I'm currently using now. How about that? Hey, a fun fact about me is I like to give away books, and I am in fact giving away books right now. I've got a 5-book giveaway that's live. I'm going to put a URL in the chat right now if you want to win 5 signed books, including a book by Troy Lambert, one by Michael Brent Collings, 2 of the special writing guests at the symposium. That's where you enter to do it.
Sweet. My name is Joe Vasicek. I write books. I've written quite a few. I've got a few on my shelf here. There's the Sons of the Starfarers series, which I've got here. Yeah, I've been I've been to L2E several times before, and I'm first time online, enjoying it. It's been going pretty good, and yeah.
My name's Scott Parkin. I'm a giant floating head who's written about 50 short stories, or published about 50 short stories, winner in the Writers of the Future contest, and all around just pleasant giant floating head.
All right. So we may have 2 other people pop in later. I don't know if they'll be able to make it, but if they do, we'll point them out when they pop in. So this year's anthology was Twilight Tales. So if you think stories along the lines of the original Twilight Zone series, that's what to expect in it. It's kind of light horror, not the slasher stuff or anything like that. So if you don't like the slasher stuff, but you're okay with Twilight Zone, you'll probably like most of the stories in here. So this is the cover. It's available on Amazon and right now print or ebook. I'm still working through, for anybody who's done book covers, you may be familiar with working through CMYK processing to try to get the cover that way. That's usually the process used for most printing. Some places don't use it anymore, but the color stuff is a lot different than in stuff you see on your computer screen. So it takes a little bit of work to get the colors to not look dull and gray and washed out looking. So that will come along. Eventually, you'll be able to order it through any bookstore that uses Ingram, which is most bookstores. So there are 31 stories in this anthology. That's the most we've ever had. It's, I think, about 10 more than the previous 5. So there are some shorter stories in this one, including one that's not even a full page. So let's see here.
I read it. It was a message to the United Nations.
Yes, it's a very fun little short. So I think that one was by Emily Martha Sorensen, if I remember. Or no, hers was a different one. I forget who did that short one. Let me see if I can.
Who did the art?
refresh my
Who did the
memory.
cover art, Joe?
The cover art was done by Amberly, Bobbie's
My
sister.
little sister. We worked
Yep.
together.
Yeah.
She did all the color work.
Yep.
We just laid it out together. But I wish she could have
So-
been here, but stuff happens.
It's too bad she's not
Yeah.
here in this very safe, welcoming environment
Right?
Yeah.
to discuss
We're all
her work.
we're all nice except for Scott. He's mean, but that's okay. He's a nice sort of mean. So
I also have the artistic temperament of a rotting turnip, so I wouldn't be able to offer any constructive criticism.
Yep.
Well, it was an
But yeah.
exciting thing to do, considering it was a picture of our grandma. So it was fun.
fun.
And I've done pictures of her before. We decided Amberly needed to, really take the reins on the finished product.
Yeah, I thought her style would fit the cover really well,
Oh yeah.
and it did. So I think she did a fantastic job. Um, Speaking of your grandma, the first time I met you was at her house when you were one of the people in the kitchen,
Yeah.
sort of wanting to be part of everything, but too scared to come out and mingle with everyone.
Yeah.
At least that's what I remember. I think you were probably
It's
like
pretty accurate.
13 or something like that. So, but yeah, Betty Pope was a librarian at BYU forever and ever and ever until she retired. I don't even remember exactly when that was. It was
It's like
several years ago.
86,
80
I
something,
think it
yeah.
was.
Yeah.
I was in 4th
Yeah.
grade.
Best house in the history of the world. Every
yes.
wall lined in bookshelves and filled with books.
Yes.
Glorious.
Overflowing with books.
And you guys haven't seen the attic. I mean, the attic was full of more books and more bookshelves.
Yep.
It had
But
overflowed
she,
quite a bit.
she
Pope,
was the one.
she was the one who put together the she worked at the BYU library, didn't she?
Yeah, she worked at the BYU
Was she the one who put
library.
together
and
the science fiction collection at the
Science
BYU
fiction
library?
collection,
She
yes.
was. She made sure there were really good things in that collection, and she even got a specific. I don't remember. Do they use the Dewey or the Library of Congress system?
I don't think they use the Dewey
Yeah.
system. It's
Whichever
a
one,
weird
she got a
they
specific
use.
number assigned just to science fiction in that library, which I think then spread to other libraries. But
Wow.
that was pretty cool. So,
As usual, we set the trend. Yes.
yep,
Just like with baby names.
yeah,
Oh dear.
yeah. We should have Nathan Shoemate in here to talk about that. But, yeah. So this one was done in honor of Betty, one of her favorite authors, who also became one of the favorite authors of my co-editor, Julita Clegg, was A. Merritt. Most of his stuff
Love
is in the public domain now. He wrote way back in the early part of the last century. So about 100 years ago, most of his stuff was out. And a lot of the stories in here kind of nod to the way he did things. So
Now I'm really
go
excited
look up,
to read them.
yeah, go look up A. Merritt if you've never looked anything up by him. There's a bunch of his stuff, I believe, on Project Gutenberg. So you can even get it for free if you want. So
It's so beautifully visual, his writing. I love it. His descriptions. It's fun
yeah,
times.
his stuff fits right in with Twilight Zone, where it's kind of that Lovecraft type horror where they don't exactly show everything, but they describe it in a way that makes your imagination go wild with it. So
Suggestion is often far more terrifying.
yes,
Description.
exactly. So one of the fond memories that I have, I was just flipping through this, is Betty Pope would hold receptions after the symposium, and she would give each of the guests an afghan that she had crocheted. She often gave the chairs the afghans too, and I have one still from when I was chair. I wasn't expecting it because apparently I didn't know that she did to the chairs. I knew she gave them to the guests, but that was really cool, and I still have it 25 years later. So,
They're good
but
and cozy.
one of the things to note about this, if you he doesn't have it up right now, but Dave's book that just came out, The Jupiter Knife, that series has the main character is named Hiram Woolley. And there's a Hiram Woolley story in this that's never been published before. So if you want it, it's really good. You get to learn Utah geography too, I believe. So. Oh no, that's in the other one. I'm getting things mixed up because I should note I'm working with Dave on a collection of his right now too that we're going to be putting out. And so I keep forgetting which stories are in this and which stories are in that one. And so that one that I just referenced for the geography thing, that's in the other thing. So that comes out later this year. This one that he has in here, I'm just going to, for the people who are here, I'm going to name off their stories and then let them tell you about them a little bit. So, Thirsty Bones. Dave, tell us a little bit about Thirsty Bones, a teaser, if you will.
So it is a Hiram Woolley story. The covers, the second Hiram Woolley novel just came out last week, and so that's, I think it's the 2 covers you're seeing now on the right and left of my screen. Hiram is a sugar beet farmer from Lehi, Utah, and in the stories are set in 1945. I couldn't believe when Aaron and I were pitching these stories to Tony Weisskopf at Bain, we kept saying, she's never going to go for this. This is going to get eliminated first, and it turned out to be the pitch she went for. He's a sugar beet farmer in Lehi, Utah, whose father was a polygamist who abandoned him and his mother, who was the unfavored wife, when he left for Mexico around the turn of the century. Hiram's a great war veteran. He's got an adopted Navajo son, and he has a body of traditional magical lore he learned from his grandma, Hetty, who raised him. So Hiram uses that traditional magical lore to battle the evils of the Great Depression, shuttered mines, and played out farms and broken businesses and murders and family squabbles and evil sorcerers, plus, the stuff that happened in the Great Depression. So Thirsty Bones is a short story about judgment, about the consequences of sin, really, and the traditional magic that so in the English cunning man tradition, the village magicians of the late medieval, early modern period, we have a fair amount of writing about these guys. One of their principal functions was to substitute for law enforcement, because the officers of the king were far away, and you only saw the court at the assizes once a year, maybe, and even then, maybe you had to travel to get there. If you had a more immediate problem and you needed help, you might turn to your village cunning woman or cunning man. And so Hiram is solving a murder. It's an old murder. And you see him use a couple of bits of magical lore. One is the traditional magical idea that a corpse would start bleeding in the presence of its killer. But the other is what's called the Eye of Abraham. And the Eye of Abraham was a glyph that was written on a wall, and that the guilty would shed tears in its presence. So it's a short story about solving an old murder in a dry desert Utah town in the 1930s.
All right.
So I have a question though. Why Lehi?
Why not?
That's where I'm from, so I'm curious.
Well, that's interesting. If you're asking about, like, do I know secret cult histories of Lehi? No, not particularly. But
where's the Spanish gold?
And no, there are some other towns in Utah that have some really fascinating history. I don't know this. Springville, for example, in the early 20th century, had the state's most famous, most professional astrologer. Spanish Fork had a big population of Icelandic speakers right into the 1950s, words that spoke Icelandic. But no, Lehi is, a farm town. Now it's got this tech corridor thing, right? But 20 years ago, 30 years ago, Like when my dad bought his bullwhip, he went to Attack and Saddle Shop in Lehigh. That was the kind of town it was.
I think I know what that is.
Yeah, you might. So it's just a town where farmers live. That was really the point. Of course, it's got a deeply Mormon name, which it adds to the delight of it, right?
Yeah.
Lehigh,
Cool.
All right. Thank you, Dave. The next one, transition plan. Scott, will you tell us a little bit about that story?
Transition plan is set in my Regency Software universe, which is a software company, does educational software, featuring a technical writer. I wonder who that's based on. Who has various adventures in somewhat out of time ways. In this particular story, the main character, Jack Wolf, is facing the semi-annual layoff, the semi-annual bloodletting ritual of the company, and is sad to discover that his best friend at the company, and perhaps just a little bit more than friend, has been targeted for layoff. In his panic, he also discovers that he is, in fact, a creature of the night. Unfortunately, the creature was a little less impressive than he might have hoped. And this story is about Jack's attempt to save his friend, save his company, and take out the evil vice president of marketing in the process.
Very good story. I enjoyed it a lot. So, all right. And let's see, Joe, will you tell us about the Janus anomaly?
Yes. The Janus anomaly, it's science fiction, kind of science fiction horror. It's set in the same universe as my Gunslinger to the Stars series. I grabbed the book, actually. Oh. So, I don't know whether you can see it, but this is the cover. It's kind of a pretty near future universe where we make contact with the aliens and they give us, cheap FTL and cheap nuclear technology to ground orbit. And so we're able to use that to start exploring a lot of the nearby stars. And it takes, the main character is this lieutenant on this kind of military scout ship. Her name's Lieutenant Mariana de Silva. And when this ship encounters an anomaly at Captain Star, that they have to nuke the surface of it. Like some people land on, and this kind of weird spiritual thing happens down there. This like ghost kind of appears and affects the people, so they have to bring them back up and then nuke this wreckage of this alien ship that's been there for millennia. They don't know how long. And then everyone starts to act a little strange, and she finds herself. It's an epistolary story, kind of written in the log, the ship's log that she's keeping, and or her personal log. And she finds herself asking the question, what do I do when I'm the only sane person and everyone else is crazy? And that's really the question that I was wrestling with at the time. This was about 5 years ago. And I was wondering, okay, with everybody else going, like, am I the crazy one? Or is everyone else just kind of going crazy together and I'm the only sane one? And how do you wrestle with that? Feeling that you're kind of isolated in that way. And while things start spinning out of her control, the people start acting in really strange ways that endanger not only the mission, but potentially the rest of the fleet. And she has to ask herself, what do I do? What's my responsibility in this situation?
All right. It kind of had, to me at least, the feeling in the first anthology, Trace the Stars, there's a Kevin Anderson story. I believe it's called Log Entry. And it has that same feel to it, as far as you're learning the story in an unusual order, in an unusual way, through log entries. And so I really enjoyed it. And for anybody who's submitted to the anthologies and had your story not accepted, this is an example, the Janus Anomaly, of one of the stories where it got submitted for Trace the Stars, but we didn't accept it then, but we accepted it for this one. I actually specifically contacted him and said, hey, can we use this because it would fit this really well? And there's been a number of those in A Dragon and Her Girl, and this one where I specifically requested them because they'd been submitted before and we didn't use them at that point. So there is hope, even if you get rejected, that we might still reach out to you and say, hey. So, all right.
Joe, Janus is the old Roman god of doors. He had a face where he looked forward and a face that looked backwards. And this is why January is the first month of the year, because it's the portal of the new year. So I'm interested. Tell me why, or if you can, without spoilers, I guess. What's the significance of Janus in the title?
Well, it's kind of interesting because it's a god that has two faces, and what happens is that when people start acting strangely, it's like they start showing a face that isn't the same as the face they had before, or at least they start acting in ways that don't make sense with how they act before, and you can't tell what is the true face and what is the not true face. And she's also, wondering also, was I affected by this? How does this work? And so that's kind of, I thought it'd be useful to call it that. I think there was, in the story itself, there was some reason why they called it Janus. I think they named the planet Janus or something like that. But
all right. So, Bobbie, would you tell us a little bit about the process that you and Amberly went through in creating the cover? I mean,
Sure.
I know I went and met with you and said, here's my ideas of what I'm looking for. And then you guys kind of took it and ran with it.
Well, I'm going to pop it up so I can look at it. Okay, so first off, because it was a cover, we wanted to make sure that there was plenty of space, that there would be an easy, high contrast for the title and little blurbs and anything else on it. So, and considering the subject, that really lent itself to some dark and atmospheric stuff. And then we wanted to make sure that we got quintessential grandma, and it's weird growing up with so many people knowing who your grandma is. It's it's awesome, and so many people having come to her house. And I think I started going to those when I was 12. Oh gosh, that was a long time ago. And so we wanted to capture the bookshelves that were iconic in her house, and her table with the yarn that was always there. And you can kind of see that gold chair that she always had. I think the house looked the same from the 60s until she left. She, passed on. But um, so we wanted to get the base, get those very mundane, ordinary things that everybody has seen, and her cats. She had two beloved Siamese cats that we wanted to make sure were in there. And then one of the things that she introduced me to, and there's several, like A. Merritt, and one of them was Lovecraft. She gave me my first book when I was 14, and I thoroughly enjoyed Lovecraft stories because I really like the wordiness. It's crunchy and delightful. Um, and so we had to put in these kind of misty tentacles. That was a given, and they worked really well for kind of the darker section for text to go over. And then we just kind of grabbed a whole bunch of different creatures that me and my other four siblings, and Amberly all kind of had memories of, and from the books she gave us from the time we were kids. So we got some fairies and, of course, a lot of dragon things. So, and I like the little cute cyclops in the background, and Beholder, because she was very supportive of all kinds of gaming and things like that. And yeah, you can see there are a lot of little details that we wanted to include that wouldn't interrupt the um, wouldn't get in the way or distract from the title and things. So when you look a little closer, you can see little things all over the shelves. But those were the main things: making sure that we had the plethora of creatures, the space on the book, and all the grandma details.
All right. So I'm going to read one of the really short ones. This one is by Emily Martha Sorensen, who is not able to join us, but it's a very short story. It's called Invoice. And Dave mentioned this one earlier. To the United Nations, we have received your payment for the oil received from planet Zivix. It is insufficient. We asked for 850 human children, and you only included 809. Please make up this deficiency before we eat our dinner next week. Yours cordially, the Zivix Corporation. So that's the whole story.
Is it morally acceptable to say I liked it?
I thought it was a very clever story. So
That's fun. I think Grandma would have appreciated that. She also introduced me to Ray Bradbury, so had stories about how polite he was because he was swore so much, but when he was talking at the symposium, he was very careful not to swear during any speeches and stuff.
Yep. So another thing with this one, way back in the day, I never went to BYU, but my wife did. And I helped out at the Leading Edge for about a year and a half or 2 years. You'll see my name in, I think, 2 issues as one of the editor people or something. I forget. It's like a big group of editors. But one of the things that we did was read the slush pile. And we always had to look for things that we thought would work really well. And I guess my claim to fame is I was the first one to read a story called Automath that got accepted for the Leading Edge and got published. And that story is in Twilight Tales because I contacted Bob Rehak, who's the author. He's a professor at a university back east. And I told him, you know, that story Automath from 20 years ago or 25 years ago or whatever, I'd really like to use that one. Is it okay? And so you never know. Blast from the past might come back if I find a story where I really like it for whatever reason. But I would encourage you to read it. It is probably a PG-13 story in some of the details that it includes. It's a very interesting one about a government-sponsored math learning program that goes wrong. And so check it out.
809 does not equal 850.
Yes, very true. This is even more complex than that. It has to do with geometry and stuff.
Even for very large values of 3.
Yes. So does any of you, do you have any comments you want to make about the anthology? Any thoughts before I open it up to questions?
Very excited to read it, and all of my aunts want a copy. So
All right. It is available on Amazon right now. So
woo.
I'm sad not to see you sitting at a table in the lobby of the Provo Marriott selling it.
yeah,
It feels like it's just traditional.
it has been for the last 2 years, and hopefully next year we'll be able to do that again. So
Speaking of living through a somewhat live action horror story, yeah.
yeah.
It's interesting times.
So speaking of next year, next year's anthology is called Parliament of Wizards. It's in honor of Jonathan Langford. I don't remember the exact number of stories. I'd have to count them, but there are some very good stories in there, from names you're familiar with and some names you may not be familiar with. There are even some repeat people. I know Scott's been a repeat person in the anthologies. He's been in 2 of them now, and next year will be a 3rd. So apparently I like his style of storytelling, and so does Alita. So since we make that decision together, we actually have a meeting where first I go through, I'll let you in on a little bit of process of how this is done. I have no idea if other editors do it the same way, but since we're co-editors, when people submit them, I get notification of that, and I go through and clean out the name of the author from the story so that Alita reads them blind. She has no idea who wrote them unless she happened to read them before, which has happened a couple times. So she reads through them, and we have a Google sheet that we keep track of all of this on, and we mark yes, no, or maybe in our particular columns. And then we have a call where we go through all of the yeses and all of the maybes and decide which stories go into the anthology. And we sometimes debate about it. Sometimes we have more than one story from a single person, because that call is the point when Alita finds out who wrote the stories. And so sometimes we have more than one story from a single author, and we have to eliminate one of them. And then that way, another one that we might not have published gets in too. So I don't think any of the rest of you have done any co-editing things. I know Dave's been an editor on one anthology, but
So it ended up being a kind of a co-editing thing. Did you want to kind of discuss that process?
a little bit.
I mean, we put out a call. Well, I told Immortal Works, I published my novel. Here, you know what? I'll change my paper. And boom. This novel, City of the Saints, is one of the four here in my camera now. The seminal Mormon steampunk novel. And its reception convinced me that there were a lot of really interesting intersections between Mormonism and steampunk. B, people would read these stories. So I had told Immortal Works for a couple of years that they should do an anthology of Mormon steampunk stories. And they said, okay, you just tell us when. And so finally, I don't know, a couple of years ago, I said, let's do it. And put out the call. And we got so many stories. We split the anthology into 3. So it started with me and James Wymore, and then we had to bring in and we were gonna co-do it. Then we had to bring in John Olson to do the 3rd volume. But our process was more like this. We would read it and go, oh, that's awesome, that needs to be included. And read the next story and go, oh, that's awesome, that needs to be included. And very, very few got rejected, and I have to say none by me. So that's been a delight, but not, I don't know that the process sheds any light on the how stories get accepted or rejected. I every single one, I just read it, and like 5 of the stories in my volume were written by non-Mormons, and several were written by people who had never written a short story before. But I just had so much fun that they all had to go in.
And then there's a 4th volume that came out too. So
there are people who said, "What? How did I miss this?" And so then Holly Anderson edited the 4th volume.
Yep. All right. So probably in the next month or so, we'll be announcing what the next anthology will be. So keep an eye out for that if you want to submit a story. The details are forthcoming. We haven't settled on it for sure, but I'm pretty sure of what it is. So be prepared. We'll have a short submission window, again, probably about 2 months. So you'll have to write quickly if you want to write a new one, or dig through your stuff and find something that has been published before. So do we have any questions that people have put in the chat?
Household wants to know if Scott is playing Building Simulator.
Playing which? PC Building Simulator? Not
Yes.
Not at the moment.
Busted.
All right. So how about we have one of you read an excerpt, maybe just the first couple pages or something of your story. Joe, do you want to read yours first, and then we'll go from there?
Yeah, I think I got it up right here. Let me check real quick.
Putting people on the
I've got
spot.
a 7-year-old computer that can run Discord when it's the only thing, but has a little bit of difficulty sometimes when it's running other programs. But here we go. Oh, and the Janus, to answer your question, Dave, the Janus is the name of the starship in the thing. So it opens EFS Janus, vicinity of Captain Star, Gliese 191, mission day 103, 2100 hours. My name is Lieutenant Mariana de Silva, and I am the Chief Communications Officer of the EFS Janus. I am keeping this record separate from the standard ship logs in direct violation of Earth Fleet protocols because I have reason to believe that sanity of my crewmates may have been compromised. I hope that this personal log will provide a clear record of events as they actually transpired. If instead I am the one who is not completely sane, I am prepared to submit myself to a full medical examination and any disciplinary action that Earth Fleet sees fit. The situation began on mission day 92 when we investigated an anomaly on the far side of Captain Star. The colonists at Gliese 191, New Chelyabinsk, reported a radio signal emitted from a known rogue planet about 0.4 light years distant. We arrived at New Chelyabinsk on mission day 89, refueled, and departed for the rogue planet on day 90. Before I continue, I should give you some background on our mission, if for no other reason than to confirm that I still remember it correctly. The EFS Janus is a survey and patrol ship on a 180-day tour of the Gliese colonies, with orders to chart all potential FTL routes and investigate any significant points of interest. While the Janus is a military vessel, the mission is primarily scientific in nature. We arrived at the rogue planet at 0645 and began a survey. It was a large super Jupiter with 3 Earth-sized moons, 2 of which had significant cryovolcanic activity. On the third and most distant moon, we discovered the wreck of an alien starship, probably of Hyadian origin. It was from this record that the radio signal was emitting. At 1730, we sent an away team to investigate. I was on duty on the bridge when they landed. I'm seeing some movement over by the primary door, Corporal Johnson said. It looks almost like smoke. All right, let's see if my computer will scroll. Sometimes it's a little buggy. This is what happens when you get a computer was old in 2014, probably.
I would brag right now about my 16 cores and our 16 processors and 32 cores, but that would probably be unkind.
Yeah, well.
So I won't do that.
All right. Well, thank you for not doing that.
I will understand it anyway, Scott. So,
Sorry, 16 cores and 32 threads. 64 gigs of RAM.
I frowned and glanced at the captain. Johnson's video feed was on the main screen, but there was nothing in view like he was describing. Can you repeat that, Johnson? Captain Andrzejczyk asked. It's rising about 2 meters from the fuselage, coming together in some sort of, oh my God. Are you picking this up? Lieutenant Amanda Strauss asked. As the mission chief xenoarchaeologist, she was the leader of the away team. Negative, Lieutenant, I said. Can you give us a clearer picture? I'm looking right at it, she said. If you can't, it's coming right at us, Corporal Johnson shouted. His head cam went shaky as he turned and ran. For a very brief moment, I thought I saw something on Lieutenant Strauss's video feed. It wasn't a cloud of smoke or anything that took a solid shape, just a very dim ball of green light, almost outside of view. It grew brighter and she screamed. One by one, all the members of the away team fell unconscious. Captain Andrzejczyk raised the alert level and sent down a squad to rescue them. The rescue proceeded without incident, and all the scientists were recovered safely. As soon as everyone was on board, we nuked the wreckage with a 50-kiloton warhead and broke orbit. In the next 3 days, everyone on the crew came down with a mild stomach flu. I came down with it on the 3rd day at the tail end of my shift and reported straight to sickbay. Looks like you've got what everyone else got, said the doctor. Lieutenant Johann Wisner told me. Best I can do is give you an anti-diarrheal and prescribe some R&R. What do you mean everyone's got it? I asked. Exactly what I said. My guess is that something got contaminated in the kitchen and we all ate it. But don't worry, it should pass soon. I had known that a lot of us had come down with something, but I had no idea that the entire crew had been infected. In retrospect, I should have investigated that, but it seemed that Captain Andrzejczyk and the doctor had the situation under control. As communications officer, it wasn't my responsibility or area of authority, so I let the matter go. Dr. Wisner was right. The flu passed soon enough. Within 24 hours, I was fit enough to return to duty, as were most of the crew. I used the extra downtime to prepare my incident report of the encounter at the rogue planet. That was when strange things began to happen. On mission day 97, I reported to the bridge at 0600 and logged into my console, as per usual. Captain Andrzejczyk was on deck, with Lieutenant Cooper on the helm. I've submitted my incident report for the anomaly outside Captain Star, Captain, I reported. He gave me a puzzled look. What anomaly, Lieutenant? I frowned, not sure how to take his question. The one we investigated last week, sir. We have investigated no anomalies in the vicinity of Captain Star. Sir, I stammered, not sure how to address the issue without flatly contradicting him. What about the other incident reports from the crew? I have received no other incident reports. This is the first I've heard of it. At this point, I was thoroughly confused. Lieutenant Cooper had been on the helm when Strauss's team encountered the anomaly, but he had the same blank look on his face as the captain. The only explanation that made any sense was that they were playing some kind of prank on me. Very funny, Captain, I said. In any case, my report. This is not a laughing matter, Captain Andrzejczyk interrupted me. Are you feeling well, Lieutenant De Silva? Do you need to report to sickbay? I took a deep breath. I don't think so, sir. Dr. Visner cleared me for duty yesterday at 2100. Even so, I think you may need a second evaluation. I need all the officers in the ship to be in peak physical and mental shape at all times. Yes, sir, I said, locking off from my console. As I rose to my feet to leave, confusion and frustration welled up inside me, and I clenched my fists by my side. What about the warhead, I blurted. Captain Andrzejczyk frowned. The warhead, Lieutenant? Yes, sir. The 50-kiloton warhead we detonated over the anomaly after rescuing Lieutenant Strauss's team? I'll look into it, he said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. It was clear I wouldn't get very far without another breach of protocol, so I left and reported to sickbay.
All right. So you'll have to pick up a copy in order to hear the rest of the story, as they say. All right. Thank you, Joe. Let's see. I think we're pretty close to time.
About 10 minutes.
About 10 minutes or so. Okay. Maybe 7 minutes, somewhere around there. Dave or Scott, would you like to read a short excerpt? Either one of you?
I think it appears that Scott wants to sing, actually.
Do you really think either one of us is going to say no? Go ahead.
Nothing really matters.
I want
Fabulous.
to sing. Oh,
All right, I
It's
will
not
read.
singing and dancing.
For sure.
That should be the cover of the
all
next
right, I'll
anthology.
read like
Yeah.
Let's not quibble over who killed who. It should be a happy occasion. Your turn, Dave.
All right, thank you. We're right. Jenkins looked mildly surprised and deeply bitter. Bones. Didn't kill your brother. Alf Shaw's good eye and his voice were sour. Blessed are those that hunger and thirst after justice. Woolley set aside the mosaical rod, ignoring Shaw's look of skepticism, and peered down into the pit. It was shallow, a square trench hacked out of the tawny orange clay. On one edge, white bone protruded jarringly into view. Human skull. In the center of its forehead, a hole. A warm breeze rose from the valley behind Hiram, scattering red sand over the skull and bringing the scent of juniper to his nose. You mean righteousness? Shaw grumbled. The Beatitudes, right? It's hunger and thirst after righteousness. Come to think of it, you're right. Hiram raised his hat, letting the warm breeze dry some of the sweat in his balding scalp. Only, I heard my Bible from Grandma Hetty as a boy, and she sometimes quoted it funny. Comes of her reading in German, I guess. Jenkins shouldered forward and looked into the hole. That's my brother, I'm sure of it. Almost certainly was, since Hiram had found it with a hazel mosaical rod carved with the name Tommy Jenkins and bound with a rubber band to a faded photograph of the man. Hiram felt uneasy. His service in the war hadn't inured him to the awe and dread of death. The opposite. Maybe. Hiram squinted at the Henry Mountains, white-shouldered with snow. Hopefully we can find water in the wells now. Somehow he doubted it. That had been too simple. It's likely an old Ute body anyway, Shaw said, or Navajo. They ain't too far away. Always finding arrowheads and old corn cobs around here. These ain't going to give you a lick of water. I don't know why I ever went along with this. Angeline was here. She'd tongue lash us all senseless. Walked right to the spot, Jenkins said. Are you saying it was coincidence? Or that this sugar beet farmer knew the body was here to start with? If that is your brother, Shaw bowled ahead. That don't mean his body is what's dried up all the wells. Both men's tempers were running high, and the peacemakers were blessed too. In any case, Hiram said, as gently as he could, we have bones to deal with. I grunted. Hiram stuck in his shovel, and the three men quickly unearthed the skeleton, laying it alongside the pit. The corpse lay close enough to the surface that its flesh had been eaten away by bacteria. Stubborn tufts of long red hair clung above the temples. Hiram stretched his back and looked down both sides of the ridge on which they stood at the Shaw farm and the Jenkins land. They were far from any trail, and the body might have spent seasons exposed up here without being noticed. If the corpse did belong to a Ute, it was a Ute who'd worn denim jeans. Strips of the fabric clung to the skeleton's legs and pelvis, and corduroy patches stitched together and faded almost to white suggested what might once have been a jacket. 30 years, Jenkins sucked air in past his teeth. My brother wore a coat like that. A patch coat? Shaw grunted. We all wore patch coats, and we all walked on rag rugs. I grew up poor, same as you, and this skeleton ain't got enough of a face to tell who he was. My brother disappeared, Shaw. I say this is him. Hiram felt uneasy in his stomach. He leaned on his shovel and snaked his spare hand into the pockets of his overalls, wrapping his fingers around the cool stone of his heliotrope. The stone had the power to warn him of deceit, but now it lay still and innocuous. Brother telegraphed from San Diego. He didn't disappear. He left. Someone telegraphed from San Diego, and then we never heard from Tommy again. You inherited your daddy's farm. Shaw snorted. Both farmers were heavy men, red from working in the sun, but Shaw was the beefier of the two. He mopped the back of his neck with a handkerchief, sweating from the exertion of the conversation. Maybe it was you that killed him, and then lied about a telegram. Hell, I never saw no Western Union slip. Probably that's all the time we have for reading.